host, and he's going to speak a bit about economic development.
Thank you. Well, it's good to see so many people here today and follow up to the Economic Summit. Most of us see a lot of familiar faces from that. I think that the thing that, for me, impressed most was the fact that we had people all the way from litigants on one side of an issue to litigants on the receiving end of that, sitting in the same room and finding not what they disagreed about, but what they had in common. The goal of the Economic Summit was to see whether we might find some basic principles, some basic assessments of our assets, and then to try to not just talk about it, but actually get something real deliverables, real outcomes from that process. Today, we're going to hear from the gentleman who I'll be introducing in a moment that not only has talked the talk, but has walked the walk out there. And our goal for these communities is to get moving on some things that we won't fight about. We can agree that in a time of economic hardship, where there are many people in this county, many businesses, and many individuals that are suffering, where we have people facing foreclosures, where we have, for a long time, had an economy that was really not as vibrant as the people who live here, and not reflective of the natural riches and assets that we have in these communities. We're looking for an opportunity now to use our greatest resource, which is the talented and innovative and knowledgeable people that live here, to have a process not for defining our differences, but to see whether we can agree that there's no reason to fight about things that make sense for all of us. Having a robust economy does not necessarily mean the destruction of what people hold dear in these communities. And yet, the fight that we seem to continually have, and what leads to a level of paralysis at times, is that we will develop what I call false dichotomies. You're either pro-growth or you're no growth. You're either new to the place or you just came here. You're a logger or you're an environmentalist. But these differences look a lot greater from outside of a room than when we come together in a place like the Economic Summit and really talk about what our hopes and aspirations are as a community. There's nobody who wants to see us suffer economically. Despite the political rhetoric and despite the ways that different approaches people have to building an effective economy, I have yet to meet somebody who thinks that we ought to be desperately poor and planning to be so forever. Similarly, I don't think I've yet met a person who thinks we ought to pillage and loot and destroy the very things that bring people here or keep people here in the first place. So if those two poles, if those two distances that people lob rhetorical bombs and lawsuits at each other from, if those really aren't true, then it would seem that we have a whole lot of ground in the middle of that in which to engage in dialogue, lively repartee, occasional bombast, a bit of humor, and yet ultimately something that gives us a working plan to proceed on together. The good news for us is that has happened in some places, that there are examples that we can draw on, that we can learn from. We're not having to reinvent the wheel. We actually have a moment upon us and an individual who I think most people were impressed with at the Economic Summit. He spoke at a plenary session. He used humor. He shared his experiences. He talked about successes and failures. And he challenged us to get past whatever it is that's been hanging us up and identify some assets and figure out how to capitalize on them without destroying the goose that lays the golden egg. I'd like to give you a little background so you can be thoroughly impressed and big long resume here, but it's important before he speaks that you know exactly who we're dealing with. Tim Johnson's worked in economic development for nearly 25 years. He's held senior and executive management positions in public and private sector organizations. He recently finished a volunteer stint in the Gulf Coast helping to deploy grants and loans to business and industry impacted by Hurricane Katrina. Graduate of Stanford, he's done work in Yuba and Sutter Economic Development Corporation, dealing with the aftermath of the floods that devastated. See, they didn't just have a bad economy, they were swept away. You may recall the huge floods that happened makes Haas Road look like a walk in the park. But he worked there. When he went there, unemployment was nearly 20% in the aftermath of that. He was able, in the process of economic development, to reduce that to 9%, aiding in the reduction of poverty levels from a high of 22% to 13% in less than 6 years. Sounds like we could use a little bit of that. Tim supported the attraction of multiple Fortune 500 companies to Northrop Grumman, including Northrop Grumman and Cisco Distribution. He's also worked in the planning of Sutter Crossing, largest industrial science and research park in the city yet to be named, 10,000 acres, north of San Francisco and Portland, Oregon, and the corresponding investment of $3 billion of new development for business, industry, and housing. During this tenure, Tim led a 10-county effort, so it is possible that counties can work across lines. If there's anybody from Tuolumne here? Well, it wasn't. Come on, you can admit it. I know there's at least 1 or 2 Amadorians, or at least former Amadorians, but at any rate, the idea of working in regional ways is not unfamiliar to him, and to pull 10 counties together in an economic development effort is quite extraordinary, and of course that deals with Beale Air Force Base, the conversion of that. Other things that he's been involved in, I'll just quickly mention, is helped host and plan events such as the Super Bowl, America's Cup, World Cup, and the Republican National Convention and World Series. So we're dealing with a heavy hitter, a serious guy, somebody who would do us well to listen when he calls on our better selves to actually find what we have in common and do something about it together. Tim Johnson, please step forward. By the way, before he commences, there is one piece of news. About an hour ago, I got a call saying that Tim's back was acting up and he might be completely immobile, and that I should be preparing not to introduce somebody, but wing it and do a baffle gab and do this address. So I want to thank him personally for suffering the ride up here and actually attending. And you should probably thank him as well to have a long-winded politician leaving the stage early.
Painfully happy to be joining you today. As you get older, and I might add, I am a member of the American Association of Retired People, a young member, but nonetheless a member, so don't be screwing with my Social Security. I told Diane yesterday, I said I did a really foolish thing, and I should know better than to get up on my roof and be working on it during a summer day, but you know, I missed that that step on the ladder and just took the back the wrong way. So you'll excuse me if I grimace a couple times as I go through this. Hey, it's great to be back again. I appreciate it. I had a wonderful time visiting with all of you. I walked away with a great vision for your community. You are nothing but salt of the earth people, and your community is far, far better for you living here. So I can't applaud you enough. A lot has happened over the last month, obviously, so instead of getting right into an economic issue here, we always seemingly forget about the human element of what we do for a living. So just by show of hands here, how many of you have celebrated a birthday between the summit, which was the 1st of July, and today? Anybody show of hands? Well, great. Happy birthday to all of you. Has anybody brought a newborn into the world or become a grandparent during this period of time? Anybody? Okay, so we're not adding any more to the population. Congratulations, everybody, on celebrating another birthday. It reminds me of a story. A gentleman walking back roads through Calaveras County and coming across a herd of sheep, and he saw the rancher out there, and man engaged the rancher in a question, and he said, let me ask you, I'll bet you I can guess how many head of sheep you have in this herd. And I'll bet you one head. The sheep rancher looked at the man. That was kind of a peculiar request. He said, okay, I'll take that bet. The guy said 369. The sheep rancher looked back at the guy and he goes, holy smokes, how did you know that? The guy picked up sheep, started walking down the road. The sheep herder scratched his head and goes, hey, wait a minute. Turnabout's fair play. How about if I bet you my sheep against what you do for a profession? The guy goes, okay, that's a fair bet. He goes, I bet you're an economist. The guy looked back at him and he said, how in the heck did you know that? He goes, well, if you put down my dog, I'll tell you. Well, anyway, let's move on with economics now. One of the things I want to go back to, and I think it was probably one of the most formidable components of what we discussed together, was the difference between economic growth and economic development. And just quickly now, if you recall, economic growth is the increasing of population, infusion of capital, harvesting of natural resources, and changes in technology. That's economic growth. And that's what you've been having from 2001 to 2006. The reason, obviously, that you all got together at the summit was that you recognized that all of a sudden, whoop, the bottom's dropped out of our economic growth. Now, had it been economic development, you would have had a sustainable and diverse economy, and you probably wouldn't be meeting in the same manner that you had. You would have been looking at refinements and enhancements to move your economy along. Now, economic development, if you recall, as I identified to you, is the ability to increase wealth, income, investment, and jobs. And that's the difference of what we're dealing with here today. And that was what was so important about your summit, is I believe that you walked away with understanding the difference between the two and how you can and then begin to proceed to create a diverse and sustainable economy. I also talked a little bit about the tools that we use, shift share analysis, situation analysis, and something called the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is something that I had informed you of before that I hope that we would get to as a component. And given the fact that you're moving so quickly at this point, you're going to get a chance today to take all of the great information that you identified, which has now been put into bullet form for you, and you will be able to mark exactly the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as you so see fit, so we can build some consensus for moving forward. Now, I've been informed that you seem as though that this is a slow process. Well, folks, what can I tell you? You should be doing this when you're in the midst of economic growth, not when you're on the downside the curve of it. But nonetheless, I think you're doing quite well. In fact, I've noticed in my travels in recent weeks since the summit that many people across this state have taken notice to your efforts. People in Sierra, El Dorado County, and even Los Angeles County have asked me how you guys have persevered through this process. Some of my clients in those counties are very intrigued by the process. So before I get into exactly why we're doing the SWOT, I want to take just a few moments to say that I think you are moving extremely fast. And an analogy might be you're moving as quickly as I think as a community can be as it would relate to an Olympic sprinter in the 200 meters. In Beijing. You're really moving quite fast, and the day, once you get into the SWOT, you will move extremely quickly. And that brings me to my next point. You're going to have to then subsequently figure out, as soon as this is done, you're going to have to develop a framework, a mission, goals, and objectives, which I think will solidify themselves as we go through the SWOT. And then following that, you're going to be formulating an organization or some kind of structure in which to deploy the energies, the resources necessary to create an economic development strategy and its subsequent implementation. Now, I want to take carte blanche for a few moments because earlier in the year I've been working as a volunteer to help, and I do this periodically with communities because it enables me to work with communities that don't necessarily have the resources up front to get the job done, and it's always difficult because the first thing that happens for a city manager or county administrator is they know they have to hire a consultant. When times are tough and economies and budgets are moving away from them, the last thing they do is have available funding to be able to embark on hiring a consultant to show them how to do this. So adding back into the, if you will, back into the profession, it's important for people like myself to take the time to work with you to get you to the point where you can move forward and then be able to address issues later on. So one of the things I've looked at, and there's two things that immediately come to my attention, is that as you get to this, and I suspect within the next 30 days you will be biting at the bit to do this, is that you're going to need to formulate a structure. Your neighbors to the north and south are at exactly the same place and same time that you are. None of you, Amador, Swami, or you, have enough resources, financial resources, to do an economic development program by yourself. I'm sorry. That's just the way you see it. And I've sat and chatted with my friends up and down the state and the profession, and we've had long conversations about this. I've taken a devil's advocate position while others have looked at it and looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. Quite frankly, predicated upon your population and the national average of how much money is given per capita to economic development, the total sum that you should be able to acquire is only $37,000 to run an economic development program. That's all you get. That's all you get. Otherwise, what you're winding up doing is taking money away from tourism and the chamber and diminishing their positions in the community, and you can't afford to do that. You can't afford to do that. And so the only way that we can see fit is looking at a regional approach that achieves an economy of scale, if you will, that brings the resources, the financial resources together to be able to achieve that. Now, I probably just cut off my nose in spite of my face, and some of you have got your fists, your hands clenched into fists, saying, "What the heck is this guy talking about?" Well, you know, I've spent considerable time talking with folks at the California Association of Economic Development, California Workforce Association, California Redevelopment Association, and all the professionals, and we've had a couple roundtable discussions. And quite frankly, folks, we can't figure out any other way to make this happen unless Castle and Cook wants to stand up and underwrite this to the tune of $500,000 a year.
It's either that, David, or give the $500,000 to my campaign.
Big flash. Tough group up here. The Sergeant of Arms will move along. The point being is that, let me give you an example. Annually, the state of California, through its Housing Community Development Department, puts out technical and planning assistance grants. Typically, and I don't know, where's Tim? He can tell me more about this, but you typically, as a jurisdiction, get about $35,000 a year. And you can apply for that money. And if cities and counties particularly came together on a regional basis, for this year alone, for you to begin and implement a program, you could easily come up with $180,000 to $200,000 in an effort just to begin without even having to tap anybody in the public sector or private sector this year. So, barring that fact, you're left with the consequences of having to go out and raise this money or find it in some other means. But while you're beginning to embark on it, this would provide the opportunity for you to be able to pursue an economic development strategy. I think Al's going to come by here and handle the start instructions. Those are key issues that you need to think this through. Because for you to, and pardon the chauvinistic phrase, to man an office, it's going to cost an extensive amount of money. And even if you decided to hire a consultant on the outset, it's still going to cost you money. And the question is, where is it going to come from? So you need to look at how you achieve economies of scale, where there are regional opportunities to embrace working with one another. And yeah, I hate to say this, sometimes you have to set aside parochial attitudes in order to make it happen. But I think this is a chance for you with the 3 counties to embark on an effort that would lead you in the right direction. And I say that on behalf of the profession of economic developers in this state. I didn't just come up here and arbitrarily make this statement. It has been said with some significant research on my part in conversation with other professionals in the field to ascertain how you could do this and be successful at it. Now, while we're talking success, I'm very serious about that housing community development block grants. Those are due now. They're first come, first served. And if you are going to embark on it, I highly recommend that the city and county administrators get together and talk about how to address this issue and do it post-haste. I'll make you this promise. I'll write the grant for you for free. Don't come looking back for help. It's got to be done now, tomorrow. That means phone calls have got to be made today after this is over with. And I believe I have a meeting, and I maybe went out on a limb, but I figured since you brought me up here as a volunteer, I might as well check to see what the litmus test is of the other folks. I've talked to Mike Daly at Jackson. He's very interested in it. It's the city manager at Jackson. And I have a meeting next week, thanks to Bill Johnson, I believe, with the city and county administrator of Tuolumne and the city administrator of Sonora to discuss this further. You all are at the same place and same time. I think it is tantamount for you to embark on a regional effort at this point. Okay, let's go on to the SWOT. Diane, could you start to pass those out for me? Again, the SWOT is what we've done is we took those breakout sessions that you had, and we took what were the highlighted elements that came out of them that you discussed at the end of the day at the summit. And we put them into bullet forms for you. And I think you've got 4 pages, and I want you to look over those as I discuss this. And what that will then subsequently do is synthesize what came out of the summit. So what we then can do is, from every breakout session, you see these bulleted components. What we would like you to do is look at these, spend some time looking at these. Don't leave, don't take it with you. Get a pen or a pencil. And what I'd like you to do is, as you're looking at these, I want to do the following. I want you to identify 3 strengths out of all those bullets in your own ideas. Identify 3 strengths from all of those bullet points that you think the community should follow. Then I want you also to do the same thing for opportunity. Is one of those bullets a primary opportunity for this community? And a strength and an opportunity, a weakness and a threat can all be the same. So there's no sense of redundancy. If you want to put an SW and an O and T next to one, you can. That's fine. And then again, I want you to do the same thing with threats. I want to see 3 T's on those sheets. The same with an I, an impediment. Opportunities and threats. I'm sorry, no impediments on this one. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
3 S's, 3 O's.
3 O's, right. So we're going to let you work through that today, and then what we're going to do is we're going to compile all these, and we're going to put the, we're going to show you what the frequencies are for each bulleted point, so that you can then subsequently see what you and your colleagues have thought through. Now, the Chamber's going to take this on a road trip. Now, Diane is arguing with me on this, but I have greater degree of wisdom. Sorry on this day. There will be others that I will defer on, but like back trouble. But in the case of this, she will go to Murphy's. She'll go down to Valley Springs. She's going to go around. She's going to go to San Andreas. And we're going to make sure that we have a comprehensive review, that everybody can participate in this. Because this is your plan. And what will come out of this will be consensus building and a framework for how we move forward with an overarching mission, goals, statement, and corresponding objectives. And that will lead into a work plan that will then subsequently provide us with the ability to identify timelines, benchmarks, performance measures, and necessary resources. This should be done shortly after Labor Day. at that particular point, we're hoping that the city and county administrators will met, talk with their elected officials. We're all back in swing together, and we're moving forward with the concept of some plan of initiation by middle of September. That shows you how fast you're going. And a subsequent development of an organization sometime possibly in October or November. Maybe we'll wait till after the election. Maybe that would be a good thing, but not much longer after the election. That shows you how quick you move. That's worth some applause. That's all I can say. With that, I'm going to let you continue on with your work, and if anybody has any questions, I'm going to go over there and sit down. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say is that at the summit that we had last month, I failed to collect everyone's email address or mailing address. So I published a summary of that day, everything that happened, but I don't have, and if you'd like a copy of that, if you want to give me your email address on the top of that SWOT analysis and turn it in, I'd be happy to mail it to you. So that way you have a comprehensive idea of everything that happened and came out of each of those individual sessions on that day. So, shall we go ahead and take some time to do this?
Yeah.
You know, I want to quote one of our directors, Steve Hayward, is the county that parties together, succeeds together. So I want to bring your attention to an opportunity to party together on October 25th at Mark Twain Hall when we auction off the painted frogs and calaveras. We've brought a little frog to remind you about that, but that's an important event you should all attend. And tickets are on sale now. You can call the chamber office.
Again, thank you all for coming. I suppose you've noticed our fence boards up here, actually a little big fence boards. We had a National American Day of the Cowboy event a couple of weeks ago, and the local ranchers and cattlemen came out and brought their brands with them, and this is what we came up with. There's 52 of them on there, and it was a fun thing, and I think it's probably something we'll do every year. If you weren't there, I'm sorry you missed it. Painted Frogs, as Diane says, is going to be last part of October. That's the premier event for 2 years. We haven't done it for 2 years. We only have 15 frogs this year, so plan on attending. Tickets are available. Also, the chamber, as you know, has a mixer every month. This month, the mixer is next Thursday at Foothill Village here in Angels. And also, we have a new map just arrived on the scene. I think Diane has them up there. Anyway, if you haven't picked your maps up, we got them. And now, if you're all ready for a raft trip, we'll raffle it off. I want to know if you're insurance taking your paper. Like insurance, everything not taking you. Are you ready for this? 339. Oh, there's more. 004.
I knew it. Take a look at it, Jack. Take a look. Oh, it's a 9.
Mr. David? Yeah. Have a good time.
Start the bidding at 1,500.
Thank you. Again, thanks for coming, and turn your analysis in up at the table, and thank you very much for